Everyone, it is currently the 16th of July 2015. Let's get into this update. We have Typhoon Nanka now making landfall across the island of Shikoku here in western Japan. We've been tracking the storm system actually for quite some time now, way back to about 2 weeks ago when it formed well towards the east of Guam, moved across the northern Mariana Islands, then out to the open ocean where it became a super typhoon. Now it's turning towards the north and cruising at a pretty decent pace, about 20 kilometers per hour, but still a big threat with this one is going to be the rain coming out of it. It may not be that super typhoon intensity anymore, actually about the equivalent of a category 1 if we were talking about the Atlantic, but nonetheless, this storm system is going to cause some problems. And now right here, you got that very well-defined eye still. Actually, despite this being bombarded by drier inflow coming around the western periphery of it, we still have that moisture coming in from the south, and as it does come on shore, all that moisture is going to be hitting these mountains there in Shikoku over towards the Key Peninsula, and that's really going to be one of the big problems here. Let's take a look at some of the stats with this storm system, at least at this time. Winds right now 75, gusting up to about 105 knots according to the Japan Meteorological Agency. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center a little bit higher than that. Pressure though down to 960 hectopascals. Typically you need about 970 here in the Western Pacific to have a named storm system. So it does show you, or excuse me, a named typhoon. So it does show you this as on the low end of how strong typhoons are. But put it in comparison though, this is by far much stronger than any storms we have seen in the Atlantic thus far this year. It's still a rather potent system. Already, most of travel across Shikoku has been shut down. All the ferries have been canceled. 80 flights have already been canceled as well. And that was actually a few hours ago. I'm sure it's many more at least at this point. Furthermore, what we have been seeing is some reports of flooding out here. There has been reports of landslides. I'll get to that in a second. And even so many road closures, especially these coastal highways. Here's the latest track from the Japan Meteorological Agency though. These area in red, that's showing you that storm force warning where we could be seeing winds well over 120 kilometers per hour. That's actually around typhoon strength. Meanwhile, look at the size of this area in yellow. That is where our tropical storm strength winds extend out from. Just absolutely massive area. This has just a large wind field. Actually, a lot of this moisture has been cruising in over towards the Tokyo area here this morning, and we've even been seeing some heavy rainfall in the Tokyo area. In some locations, actually in Shinjuku, I know there was flood warnings in effect. Still is that potential, but I think the worst of the weather in the Kanto Plain is over with, at least for the time being. Now we're really just shifting all of our attention to the Key Peninsula and over towards Shikoku, because some areas, when this comes on shore, could see as much as 1,000 to 1,100 millimeters of precipitation. You think I'm exaggerating, but it's happened in the past. The Japan Meteorological Agency actually has said up until Saturday morning, this area here in northeastern Shikoku could see about 1,100 millimeters of precip, and in some instances, about 120 millimeters in a 1 hour span. You can see this here on the radar image here. This is what I'm talking about. We have our eye wall. We have that moisture coming around, these mountains out here. All of that rain extends and it pushes onto these mountains, and that squeezes it out like a sponge. I use that term quite often because I think it's fairly accurate. It's just like throwing water at a wall, and you can see that here. Look how high the cloud tops are, and then once this radar imagery picks up on these mountains in the rain interaction, it becomes very intense, and that's why we're going to be seeing that heavy rainfall warnings and that increased threat of flooding out here. So definitely very serious situation. I think this radar imagery as our storm starts to near landfall kind of tells it all. But let's continue to talk about the forecast here. From the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, they're expecting to make landfall technically during the overnight hours here on late Thursday going into Friday morning, until the storm actually starts to track farther towards the north here and back out to sea by Friday afternoon before it weakens off, and then it kind of turns towards the northeast, moving across northern portions of Honshu into Hokkaido. So let's talk about the winds thus far. We've actually seen some fairly high wind reports. This is one upwards about 85 knots. This is a high wind gust, but this is at Cape Moroto, and it's something I want you to keep in mind when we're tracking these storm systems, is that this cape right here in Shikoku, notorious for high winds. The reason is this is the weather observatory, so if you are tracking the winds with JMA, remember that this is very high up. Actually, you typically want your official wind reports to be down near sea level. So with it so high up, it kind of is negligible. Now, as far as the rainfall, though, as I mentioned, some areas here could see upwards of 1,100 millimeters. We've already been seeing reports around 350 thus far with the storm system. It's still coming on shore, but since Shikoku, you're really going to be impacted by this. Already, landslides have been reported. This is out of Yamanashi. We're seeing those large waves. The Tomei Expressway was closed down. It got this actually photo from being on air at NHK World earlier today. Thank you for watching if you did check that out. As far as the forecast, that's what we're talking about. I know it sounds quite dramatic as far as the rainfall. You may be thinking, oh, Japan's used to these storm systems, right? They are. Here in Japan, structures are built for the winds. But the big problem comes when you get the flooding and the landslides. And we actually seen that several years ago in 2011. I remember watching this storm system. It came on shore. It brought upwards of 2,000 millimeters of rainfall. This was Talus. That one caused severe flooding. This was a donut-shaped storm. It wasn't even all that impressive, but it was the moisture that came in with it and hit these mountains of Shikoku over towards the Kii Peninsula, and that one actually resulted in 80 casualties. And very tragic story. I hope that does not happen in this situation. We have been seeing reports of evacuations already, closures, but no injuries or casualties. Let's hope, fingers crossed, it stays that way. For now, though, let's continue to track this one. As always, though, stay safe out there.